Luigi Mangione makes his first public statement from jail as his defense team launches a website on his behalf. The alleged gunman who murdered the CEO of United Healthcare says that he is reading every letter sent to him in jail, and he's looking forward to reading more. We're diving into what else Mangione has to say and what his new website could mean for his case. Plus, we are joined by one of the organizers of the fundraising effort that has collected hundreds of thousands of dollars for Mangione's defense. It has been more than 2 months since Luigi Mangione was arrested at that McDonald's in central Pennsylvania, and now he is breaking his silence from behind bars, kind of. This is the new website that his defense team just launched, LuigiMangioneInfo.com. The site includes case updates, links to court documents and statements. Most are from his attorneys, but also included is a statement by Mangione himself. We'll dive into that in just a moment. This new website was launched about a week after Mangione accepted more than $300,000 for his legal defense from a fundraising website, Give, Send, Go. And you can see how much it's raised at the time of this recording. When you look at the comments and those donating money, you can see that still today, people are very passionate, just like we've seen on social media, in their support of a man who is accused of murder. Some people posting lines as simple as cheering Luigi on, to calling him brave, to declaring him a great uniter at a time of great division in America. And again, we're going to hear from one of the organizers of this fundraising effort in just a moment. But first, let's go back to December 4th, 2024, when all of this began. It was on that day that United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was walking in front of the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan when he was shot in the back by a masked man. Thompson died at the hospital. The shooter got away. Police say that shooter was Mangione, and they tracked him down to this McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. One of our first looks at Mangione in custody was as he was being brought into the county jail in PA, and he yelled back to the media that was filming him.
Down.
Luigi. Oh, back up. That's completely out of touch. And it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
You can hear part of what he said, saying, quote, an insult to the intelligence of the American people and its lived experience. The next time we saw Mangione was when he was transferred to New York, and he was given that perp walk that looked straight out of a movie. It included New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Mangione has pleaded not guilty to charges including first-degree murder in furtherance of terrorism. And now we're reading what Mangione has to say from behind bars in this statement that was posted on the website launched by his defense team. Here it is. It reads, quote, I am overwhelmed by and grateful for everyone who has written to me to share their stories and express their support powerfully. This support has transcended political, racial, and even class divisions as mail has flooded MDC from across the country and around the globe. While it is impossible for me to reply to most letters, please know that I read every one that I receive. Thank you again to everyone who took the time to write. I look forward to hearing more in the future, end quote. And he will have a little more financial help as this website has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for his legal defense. And you can see again just how much money it has right now. Joining us now is a spokesperson for the December 4th Legal Committee, as well as the host of the Party Girls podcast, Sam Beard. Sam, thanks for taking the time to be here. I just looked at your fundraising website, and at the time of this recording, it's raised roughly $482,000. How much of that money has gone already to Luigi Mangione's defense?
So I'll need to check the actual transfer of the funds, but all of those funds will be going to Luigi's legal defense, 100% of them. Except for the fee, except for the fees that Give, Send, Go, the platform itself takes from it, and it's something like 2 or 3% or something to that effect.
Because I know that it's been reported that about $300,000 that he's already accepted that amount. Is that correct?
Yes. So to clarify what that actually meant is we had spent a while trying to get in contact with his team, and naturally they're very busy, and Luigi himself is a hard cat to get a hold of. And we got word from his lead legal defense attorney that he was aware of the fund and was indeed ready to accept it. So that announcement was sort of actually just saying we had made that preliminary contact, and his team, he and his legal team have decided to accept the funds. And then we've got this sort of like actual technological transfer of the funds from one account to another. And that's an ongoing process. I'll have to check in on the status of that today.
Because I know in the beginning, as his legal team was coming together, there were some questions of whether or not they would actually accept this money. What's changed?
Sure. I mean, one could only speculate. I do know that at the beginning, the gentleman who said that was Luigi's first attorney, based in Pennsylvania. The makeup and dynamic of his legal team sort of shifted over time as he retained his lead defense attorney, Karen Agnafilo, in New York City. And then over the course of a few months, I would imagine his team sort of expanded, really sort of got grounded in what their approach is going to be, and decided that, yes, they wanted to tap into this sort of unprecedented public support for their client.
And it's been more than 2 months since he was arrested and charged with the death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Looking at the fundraising website, at least the last time I saw it, I mean, there's still, it appears, some donations coming in each day. How much momentum has that website had, even as this story, certainly still a big story, but it's not the headline that it was back in December?
Right, of course. One, I guess the daily news cycle moves on, and a lot's changed. We had the holidays, obviously. We had a new federal administration coming into play. So there's a lot to focus on in this busy world. The fundraiser itself has ebbed and flowed, sometimes in accordance with the news cycle, and sometimes in accordance with a different cycle, and that is the online discourse surrounding ways to support Luigi in his right to a fair trial, in his defense, as well as just sort of updates that the fundraiser itself has seen. So, of course, when a couple weeks ago, Newsweek published an article sort of remarking at how some of their donations had slowed down. And in response to that, they were able to get a quote from Luigi's lead defense attorney that said, actually, indeed, Luigi is accepting this money. And then, of course, that causes a boost. There are a lot of people in the sort of Luigi support communities that fractal out over the internet and across the country, and indeed the world, were wondering the nature of the fundraiser, and were, until they got verdict from Luigi's team that the money was going to go to where the December 4th Legal Committee was hoping it would go, and the donors were hoping it would go. They were really finally able to push that fundraiser and on a lot of different channels as well. So we've seen an outpouring of support, not only for the fundraiser, but certainly for Luigi.
Have you had any communication with Luigi Mangione, even if it's through his attorneys?
We've sent a series of snail mail letters to Luigi. That's something that a lot of folks around the country have been doing, in accordance with MDC Brooklyn's policies. It's, unclear how many of those letters, if any of them have made it through, but we were able, let me just move my cat. We were able to get a message from Luigi through his defense attorney. Yeah.
What did that message say?
The contents of it, I think Luigi is hoping would remain sort of private correspondence between Party Girls and December 4th Legal Committee and him. And I want to respect that privacy of his. But essentially it was like, thanks.
And you look at this story, and I know you've been on several media outlets talking about it. And of course, Luigi is innocent until proven guilty. And you note on your platform or the fundraising website that this is about making sure that he gets a fair trial, which is something every American deserves in this country. And you also see the amount of frustration and anger and sadness that people have when they look at the healthcare system in America. But what is your response to people who look at this and say you're supporting someone who is accused of shooting someone in the back and taking a life and being charged with murder?
Yeah, I think this, I'm grateful for the question. I think Oh my goodness. Sorry, my cat. Little Nestor. He wants to be a star.
I understood.
It's brought up some really important questions about morality, about ethics, about the nature of our system. But at the end of the day, when you have an unjust system that degrades human life, someone is going to be the target of that anger, and it's either going to be the people who benefit from that system or the people who suffer the most under it, who are going to be scapegoated. I think at the end of the day, what the outpouring of support has revealed is that millions of hardworking Americans know that the people who are actually destroying this country don't arrive by migrant caravan. They arrive by limousine and private jet, wearing $10,000 suits and work on the top floor executive suites of fancy glass clad skyscrapers on Wall Street. And I think at the end of the day, everybody knows this version of America is unsustainable. And the question has sort of emerged is, will people band together to bring dignity, liberty, and justice for all, or will things just continue to get worse?
But and again, innocent until proven guilty, is murder the path to getting that change?
You know, at the end of the day, standing up to the kings who think they own this country is as American as apple pie. People aren't celebrating murder, but they understand that Luigi's alleged, oh my goodness, Kitty, um, Luigi's alleged actions have changed the conversation back to where it really belongs, right? A conversation about all of us, about a plurality of hardworking Americans who work longer, harder than any generation that's come before us. And we're sort of at this reckoning in the American story where we're like, what direction are we going to go? Um, and when it's like, you know, the question of morality and the question of ethics, it comes up a lot. And I think it's a really, really important question. But, you know, at the end of the day, we live in a world saturated with violence, right? You know, we've got AI algorithms run by the largest private health insurance corporation in the world that sort of systematically denies people life-saving medical care in order to return value to the shareholders. And it's like a deeply corrupt and creepy and frankly bizarre system that just that is out of touch with what Americans need and what they deserve.
Because I wonder, even with the death of Brian Thompson and how shocking it was, I'm sure, for not just his family, but his coworkers and people who do that work, whether we agree on the healthcare system and all of that, of what change could all of this even bring to a system? Does the system even look at losing a life as something that's going to be much of a difference when it comes to denying these claims, which, according to the evidence that's been laid forward, was the motivation for what Mangione is accused of doing?
You know, I can only hope that this moment that we find ourselves in this country leads to the change that we all need. You know, change happens when millions of Americans put down their phones, step outside, look their neighbors in the eye and say, like, your well-being, your health, your happiness, your dignity is important to me. And that's worth fighting for. You know, Maria Aspen of National Public Radio asked the question, is this the healthcare industry's Occupy Wall Street moment? And I guess I would pose that challenge again and say, I don't know. Is it? And that's up to us. That's up to the hundreds of millions of Americans who know that there's something deeply crooked and wrong with the way that we handle healthcare in this country. And, you know, at the end of the day, all we need to do is look to some of our closest allies around the world to see how they've been doing it, to understand that, like, you know, there is a solution to this, whether you call it single payer healthcare or Medicare for all, or just healthcare for everybody. We know what the solution is. And it's healthcare for everybody with no caveats and no place for people who would profit off the sickness of others.
Yes, and there's no doubt. I mean, it's an issue of healthcare in America, and the conversation with Luigi goes to that. But then, still, at the end of the day, you have something as primal as murder. And if he did what police say he did, I mean, do you worry that by giving him such strong financial support, that there's a message that's being sent saying that this is how you get change, as opposed to the fact that when Brian Thompson was killed, less than 10 days prior, or excuse me, less than a month prior, roughly a month prior, there was an election, and there were a lot of other issues that not just the politicians were talking about, but the people who voted cared about, and it wasn't healthcare.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good point. I think the fact that healthcare wasn't in the last political discursive electoral cycle is uh, is puzzling, to say the least. But at the very least, it's certainly out of step with the needs of Americans. Um, I think what happened on December 4th, 2024 revealed an underlying situation in this country that only that gesture could have revealed. And I don't pretend to say who deserves to live and who deserves to die. I don't play God in that situation. Unlike the private health executives who do think that they have that right. But that underlying situation where tens of millions of Americans were from shrugging off uh, Thompson's untimely demise in Manhattan to seemingly outright celebrating it, it revealed that people are very, very fed up with this system, and they understand it to be out of sync with their spirit, with their soul, with their needs, with their path towards wellness, right? Like such an integral part to even beginning to address all of those other important issues that were indeed at the center of last political cycle, right? If you're not healthy, if your family and your loved ones aren't healthy, you can't address these other issues too. So I sort of view health and wellness as one of the primary struggles towards a dignified life for all Americans, because it's only with health and wellness that we can really sort of face these other issues facing down our country.
When you look at the evidence, do you think that Luigi Mangione killed Brian Thompson?
I don't really know what the evidence is yet. I do know that the I don't know. What I do know is that if you look at the Google stats, after December 4th, there was an increase in the number of Americans Googling what's called jury nullification. So if you're on a jury and you're told that your job is essentially to decide whether a law was broken or not, and that's not actually the whole picture. Any juror, and this is baked into the system as a sort of safeguard towards democracy and justice. Any juror can return a not guilty verdict, even if a law was broken. You're not a robot as a juror. You're not a robot as an American. You're a person of conscience that has the opportunity to decide whether a law should be applied in a given case. You don't need to give any reasons for it. You can simply deliver that not guilty verdict. And I think that's a beautiful feature of the American jury system. I think at the end of the day, when the folks in New York City and the prosecutors and the talking heads of the criminal justice system in this country are saying it's going to be hard to find a jury, I think they know that there's an unprecedented amount of support for this young man, precisely because what people have made him stand for, and precisely because of the conversation that his alleged actions had opened up. And I think at the end of the day, he needs all the support that he can get in order to win this. I know that the state's going to throw the book at him, right? They're setting things up to potentially pursue the most austere of punishments available to the federal government. That is, of course, the death penalty. And we'll see.
How do you balance, on one hand, healthcare system is, everybody has a story about at least it was inconvenience. At most, you lost a family member because of something the healthcare system did. We've seen those stories. How do you balance that with the support for someone who, speaking of playing God, is accused of making the decision of taking someone's life?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's been so infatuating to Americans in this story is that it has sort of cracked this veneer, that's the veneer of politeness that sort of covers up a lot of the sheer brutality, galloping misery that Americans feel. And this veneer, this cracking of the veneer, it unleashed, or at least re-jump started a conversation that's been going on for a long time, which is like, what in the devil are we doing in this country? What's going on? Um, and it also sort of points to this very complex, these questions of justice, of cosmic justice, of karma, of like, what is the morality of a gesture, of an act, of taking someone's life. So in response to this outpouring of support, the feds are using terrorism adjacent charges, right? School shooters don't even get terror charges. And it seems like the only people whose fear in this society matters is the ultra rich. They live in a bubble making the profits off the violent reality of everyday American life, off the suffering of you, of me, of your best friends, colleagues, everybody we love. And many people think that the private health insurance industries, who gatekeep our society's path to wellness and health, remember, are nothing short of a cartel of cold-blooded murderers. And it's like, I think at the end of the day, a lot of people don't have sympathy for the people like wringing their record profits out of the figurative lifeblood of millions of hardworking Americans. It's deeply, deeply unsettling. And I think people know it's evil.
Yeah, and he'll be in court later this week, and the story will continue to get a lot of attention. And at this point, again, $482,000 that the December 4th legal committee and your fundraising platform has been able to raise. Sam Beard, thank you for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
And thank you for asking all the important questions that a lot of people are trying to work through themselves. Thank you.
Joining us now is former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law and Crime. What do you make of this website that Luigi Mangione's defense lawyers have put up, really putting a lot of things out there, including the statement from the suspect himself?
Chris, I'm not surprised. I've never seen a case like this with so much sympathy for an accused murderer. Karen Reed maybe comes close, but you got to go back to OJ. And even that, I think the issue was people were upset at law enforcement. There is a significant percentage of the American people that believe that Luigi Mangione is justified in what he did. And that's why he's raised almost $500,000 to support his legal defense. There's a real possibility of jury nullification in this case.
Yeah, because when you look at this website, and I just think of the tool that the internet can be and has been for the defense team in this case. I mean, how common is it these days? There have been a lot of cases I've covered where lawyers on both sides will keep it incredibly close to the vest, but in this one, the defense really trying to play into the public sympathy card.
We have seen it recently. I think a case that we've been following on Law and Crime as well is the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively case. It's really as much about the court of public opinion as it is the courtroom. And why does public opinion matter? Obviously, you want to get to potential jurors and frame their view of the case. But the reason it matters, especially in this case, is there's not much of a legal defense here. There's video, there's ballistics, there's DNA, there's cell phone. He was caught with a manifesto with the firearm that was used to commit the murder. So this is the type of case that you really want to make sure that you play to the jurors' sympathy. And that's exactly what a website like this does.
How often these days are you seeing situations where the defense actually puts out statements and creates websites like the one we're seeing for Luigi Mangione?
We're seeing it more and more, obviously. In the Baldoni case, Brian Friedman put up a website. Lively's lawyers didn't like it. They actually asked the court to take it down. But really, when you have a case that relies on whether it's sympathy or public perception, it's almost malpractice not to do this. You really should have both a legal team and a PR team, and sometimes they're part and parcel of the same strategy. That's exactly what the defense is doing here. And let's not forget, obviously, prosecutors haven't sought the death penalty yet, but they can in the federal case. So they really want to make sure they keep him alive. And this might be a way of doing so.
And of course, innocent until proven guilty, but the evidence that is facing Luigi Mangione, I mean, it's a pretty steep, it just appears to be a pretty steep hill. With that said, I understand the concern about a rogue juror who, and if he was tried on social media, he probably would be found not guilty. But in your experience, what's the reality that there could be eventually, if we get to that point, that rogue juror who, no matter what the evidence says, believes that Luigi Mangione is not guilty because they just have an issue with the healthcare system?
It's a very real possibility. And there are a lot of people that do not like the health insurance industry and have had bad experiences with denials, prior authorizations, and the like. I was actually on with one of your colleagues, Jesse Weber, and he was talking about a study that was conducted, a survey, and it said somewhere between 10 to 20% of people believe that what Luigi Mangione did was justified. And why does that matter? Because you just need one juror, 1 out of 12. That's 8%. So there are a lot of people that are watching. I wouldn't be surprised in the comments you'll see free Luigi, and there are people that justify what he's doing. But you touched upon it. This is a very strong case otherwise. Oftentimes you have murder cases that we cover here, and the defendant says it wasn't me, or I didn't mean to do it, or I was acting in self-defense. Well, none of that seems to apply here because there's so much evidence that it was Mangione who committed the murder and that he intended to do it. And he shot his victim in the back of the head in broad daylight in Manhattan. So it's not the type of case you can defend straight up on the merits like you would with other murder cases.
What might jury selection look like, knowing how public this case is to this point?
Jury selection is the most important thing in any case, but in this particular case, Chris, it is everything. The prosecution has to weed out jurors that are sympathetic to Mangione. It's not just people that, have contributed to his defense fund or posted on social media. You don't want one of those stealth jurors to get in there to send a message to the health insurance industry. Maybe they have a loved one that suffered because care was delayed or outright denied. If so, those jurors need to be off the panel. Otherwise, the prosecution is going to have a big problem.
Nima, before you came on, we spoke with one of the organizers of the fundraising effort for Luigi Mangione's defense team. And one thing that stood out to me was the conversation each time when it comes to this question of frustration with the healthcare system. How do you balance that with what Mangione's accused of doing? It seems to go down the line of all the frustration people have with the healthcare system. As a former federal prosecutor, how do you see that debate?
I understand the debate. I don't agree. Violence is never the answer, despite the frustration. But, when you have health insurance companies, and there are a lot of people who believe that they kill people. Again, I don't condone violence at all. But there are people that believe that there are blood on their hands. And there's the reason people die here in the United States and why healthcare is so expensive. And, they generally tend to have negative views, not just health insurance companies, all insurance companies. I think everyone's had a bad experience with an insurance company at some point in their life. So I think this is something that insurers need to be aware of, and prosecutors need to also be cognizant of when they're trying this case.
How are prosecutors going to approach this, knowing that, at least from what it appears, the public support will be on the side of the defendant?
Again, this is really a case unlike any other. I think you have to be very careful in how you try this case. I think already the prosecution has made one significant mistake, and that is charging Mangione with terrorism in the state case. So New York law is a little unique in that you need something more to get second-degree murder to first-degree murder. One of the ways to get there is terrorism. Again, no death penalty right now in New York, but it does carry a longer minimum mandatory sentence. The problem, though, Chris, in charging terrorism, it opens the door to all the evidence as to why Mangione did this. Let's not forget, a terrorist act is one of two things: an act of violence that intends to intimidate the public or to influence government policy. So you really got to get in Mangione's head as to why he did this. And it's going to open the floodgates to all this potentially bad sympathy evidence. So I'm surprised that prosecutors did that.
From your perspective, what do you think went into that miscalculation? Was it a belief that, hey, this is someone who is accused of shooting someone in broad daylight, doing it, leaving a manifesto? It has, if you were to check boxes of all the certain things that typically would have the public on the side of the prosecutor, so we're going to move forward with it. And then perhaps they didn't realize that the public, from what we're seeing, would actually be on the side of the defendant, like what we're seeing in this case.
I think Alvin Bragg's office had some blinders on and didn't realize the sympathy factor here looms large. Again, with respect to a small but significant percentage of the population. Look, without getting political, Bragg's office has arguably overcharged people before, and I think that's what happened here. Not to say that this isn't a terrorist act, but it isn't necessary to get this defendant a life sentence in New York State prison. The same thing with piling on federal charges. Again, you don't typically see those state and federal prosecutions go in parallel. There's the Department of Justice has a petit policy, an internal policy that generally says you're not supposed to do this unless there's a compelling federal interest that isn't vindicated in the state case. We saw it in the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd case, the McMichaels and Roddy Bryant with respect to Ahmaud Arbery, but there were civil rights issues at play there, and kind of goes back to Alvin Bragg's decision to maybe charge Donald Trump with all those felonies when a lot of folks believe that maybe the case shouldn't have been charged at all, or if it was more properly a misdemeanor case.
How could that sympathy card factor into whether or not this does become a death penalty case?
Well, the death penalty is going to be up to the Department of Justice. And obviously, we have a new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and a new administration. And they take a very different view of the death penalty. Obviously, President Biden, on his way out, commuted the death sentences of many federal inmates to the chagrin of the new administration. So I wouldn't be surprised if they seek the death penalty in a case like this. Of course, that will lead Mangione supporters to say that, hey, this is someone who's being targeted. This is someone who's being treated differently because his victim was a rich and successful CEO. If it were an ordinary Joe Schmo, would this be a death penalty case? I don't know.
It's interesting to think about. And I want to go back to the jury selection part of it, because most people have not sat on a jury before. And it's easy to sit there and be like, if you're someone who supports Luigi Mangione, you say, no matter what it is, I'm going not guilty because I can do that as a juror. In your experience, what is the reality for a juror? What are some of the parameters that are put in place? What's the environment that they're in where certainly they could vote not guilty, but how realistic is it that that could happen even if all the evidence is as tall as it appears to be?
It's possible, and really the only defense in this case. So let's go back to jury selection. For those of us who haven't had the good fortune of being on a jury, even though it's called jury selection, it's really more jury deselection. A group of potential jurors are brought in the courtroom, and the judge starts first by asking questions, and he or she will remove jurors from the panel if he or she thinks they can't be fair and impartial. So the judge will start striking jurors. Then the parties get a certain number of peremptories. Those are strikes that they can use for any reason or no reason at all, as long as they're not discriminatory, race, religion, national origin, and the like. So the jurors that are left, they become the 12 jurors and the alternate. So, if you're on that panel, you're going to be asked questions about your views of the case, the health insurance industry, if you've posted on social media about this, if you donated to the legal defense fund, and between the judges and the lawyers, if they think you can be fair and impartial, you're going to be on that panel. So if you are a juror in the case, you're going to hear evidence, and you're going to hear the evidence that we talked about, the video evidence, the DNA on the water bottle, the electric bike, him traveling from Georgia to New York, fleeing to Pennsylvania, everything we know about the case. And the judge is going to instruct the jurors that they are to follow the law and they're not to make decisions based on sympathy. Of course, we know that some jurors don't follow the law, even though we hope and expect that they do. And if one juror decides to vote not guilty, even if all 11 want to convict, that is a hung jury. You need a unanimous 12 out of 12 for a criminal conviction in New York.
Typically, I feel like jury selection and the way that the trials are covered is kind of the prelim stuff and doesn't get a lot of attention. Eventually, when we get there, in this case, if it goes to that point, it's going to be fascinating to watch. Nima Rahmani, former federal prosecutor, president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate it too.
Mangione is due in court on Friday in New York, then on Monday in Pennsylvania, and we will be following it every step of the way. For Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.